Well, yesterday we looked at verse 14 where, James asks the question, how can you plan for tomorrow when you don't even know what tomorrow is going to bring? And he didn't mean that in an absolute sense, I don't believe. I think that we need to make plans. I mean, my life is organized around a calendar and a schedule, and Lord willing, I'll be able to do that. I mean, for example, these daily devotionals, I have to schedule time and places and all the things that need to go into just being able to provide these on a daily basis. That's all part of a plan. And I try to forecast. Sometimes when when I'm traveling, I'm out of town and I can't do these, I will pre-record them as this week I've done, just to make sure that they're ready to go every week. So don't want to get the idea or imply in any way that something's wrong with planning. But here's where it would be a problem. If I decided that I was going to do these daily devotionals, simply because I wanted to do that. I thought it was a great idea. The truth of the matter is, it wasn't something I necessarily gave a lot to. When COVID hit, I did it as a stopgap because I realized we weren't in fellowship, we weren't talking to each other. And I was surprised at how beneficial they have been to so many of you. And I thank you for that because I enjoy doing this and I hope they're a benefit to you. And the day they're not, please let me know and I'll certainly stop. Because it is a lot of work. I mean, I have to admit that. But nonetheless, it's a fulfilling and satisfying work. But he goes on in verse 15 to ask this question. He says, what is your life? You are a mist that appears for a little while and then vanishes. What comes to my mind is the Psalm 90 that was written by Moses. And it's the only psalm we have attributed to that man. And in verse 3, he makes this statement. He says, you turn men back to dust, saying, return to dust, O son of men. For 1,000 years in your sight is like a day that has just gone by, or like a watch in the night. You sweep away men in the sleep of death, and they are like the new grass of the morning. Though in the morning it springs up new, by evening it is dry and withered. And then further on in verse 10, he says, the length of our days is 70 years, or 80 if we have the strength. Yet their span is but trouble and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. Part of what I find kind of fascinating about that last statement in particular is that Moses didn't even begin his real ministry until he was 80 years of age, and he lived to be 120. And so we shouldn't understand this as a chronological law limiting how long we're going to live. But he's making a point that is generally true about mankind, that as much as people try to push the life expectancy up, most of us will end our journey here sometime in our 70s or 80s, or if something else happens, much, much earlier. Very few of us are going to reach those upper levels. And quite honestly, my father-in-law, who's 98, he really is kind of real open and kind of anxious to the idea that he can leave, because he says, as I get older, my mind becomes forgetful, my body begins to have aches and pains, and I can't do what I used to do, and I feel more and more confined to this carcass. And you begin to realize that there's no great glory in living forever. In fact, that would be the worst torment that I could ever think of. But the whole point is that he's really making an emphasis here about what becomes the ultimate objective of our life. Are we living for time, or are we living for eternity? And what he's telling us is, this is a real bad bargain, living for time, because your time isn't that long. It passes by really quickly. I'm 71 years of age. My wife and I celebrated our 51st wedding anniversary. We got married at 20 when we were young kids without a clue and without any money or without any preparation. But by the way, we just had a basic Christian commitment that we're not going to have physical relationships with each other until we were married. My wife was very insistent upon that. And so, it's this idea that, as Paul said, it's better to marry than to burn. And so we got married, and it's been an amazing partnership. It hasn't always been easy, as you always know, but it's been so much better than I anticipated. And I'll tell you this, the older we get, the more we enjoy and appreciate one another. And I think that's part of it, is you pass through many seasons of life, because there's all sorts of seasons. And interesting that those who have studied this, that people who are married in their 70s and 80s are much more fulfilled and satisfied than those people who gave up and went through multiple marriages. There's just a greater satisfaction the longer you have to season together, the sweeter the wine becomes. So to say all of that, what Moses is saying, it's a crazy and foolish thing for us to put all of our chips on the bookends of birth and death in this world, that we really need to be looking to our ultimate eternal goal, the thing for which we were created by God. So, I think the thing to really sit back and think about for a moment, and I realize this message will reach different of you at different junctures or points or seasons in your life. For those of you who are older, it makes a lot of sense to you. It's easy for you to see what I'm talking about. For those of you who are younger, it's a much more difficult thing to grasp because you have so many things in front of you that you feel you need to accomplish. Let me tell you that it's like the adage, the poem that my pastor used to always quote all the time, an anonymous unknown writer, but he used to quote it quite frequently, at least part of it, where he said, "One life will soon be past, and only that which is done for Christ will last." So I've got to do a lot of things in my life. I've enjoyed a lot of things. I've accomplished a lot of things. I feel very satisfied with where the life has taken me. I've done far more than my parents ever expected me to do. And I really didn't anticipate either. But the thing I think is most important is that I believe that with all my heart that my life really begins when I get to heaven. And it's the rewards that come with a life lived here that I look forward to reaping when I'm in the presence of the Lord. Living in the light of eternity, such an important concept, and not being locked up into the shadows of time. It'll change everything. It'll change your perspectives. It'll change your priorities. It'll change the way in which you make plans, because you'll start saying, "God, I don't know what's best, but I ask you to show me and guide and lead me." And He will. He will do it. He'll surprise you. You'll be in the midst of some new adventure and you hadn't even anticipated. Well, one more to go this week, and then we'll wrap this portion of James up, but look forward to going on with you. So God bless you and go in His grace.